My family's leaving my niece with us. They think we should be happy about it. At the door are my husband's parents and his sister, with her 2-year-old daughter. They've been asking us to look after her since they got divorced half a year ago. Instead of easing off, they're insisting we take her, even though we're not in a position to raise someone else's child. But things are about to take a surprising turn with this little girl. I'm Kelly Allen, and I'm 27. I married John, who's 29 and was running a restaurant when we got married 3 years ago. We hoped to have kids, but it didn't happen. Luckily, Jan has been really kind to us, making our lives busy but fun. I've hardly seen John's family since we got married because he's not close to them. The gap between them got bigger when he opened his restaurant. His parents worked at a big family restaurant chain, and they wanted him to join too. But John had his own dreams. I want to make dishes that everyone will love, John explained. But instead of understanding him, his sister treated him like he was attacking their family's restaurant chain. Are you saying our food isn't good enough? John must have found it frustrating that she wouldn't listen. After endless arguments, John gave up trying to convince them. I'd rather keep my distance from Mom and Dad. Okay, I'll stay out of it too, I told him, and we enjoyed our peaceful days together. But everything changed when Jan divorced and moved back in with their parents 6 months ago. One weekday during lunch rush, Jan burst into the restaurant. I'm here again. It's so quiet in here, she loudly announced, bringing her mother and her 2-year-old niece. They sat down without hesitation. You're back. Remember to keep it down, John reminded her. Always complaining. Anyway, I'll have the usual and make it quick. Jane never pays when she visits, and we were getting tired of it. I signaled to John that I'd handle it and stepped in front of Jan. There are other customers waiting, so if you're dining here, you'll need to pay like everyone else. What? You're actually charging family? How low can you get? Jan's outburst drew the attention of everyone in the restaurant. Please lower your voice, it's disturbing others, I politely requested, but she ignored me. This is all your fault. John's changed because of you. Her harsh words froze the atmosphere. My husband, stopping his cooking, emerged from the kitchen. If you're here to cause trouble, please leave. We can discuss any issues later. We'll address any concerns you have, so please stop causing a scene. But Jan continued to complain, ignoring both me and my husband. Even her mother, instead of reprimanding her, just urged her to hurry up and order. Seeing that we couldn't defuse the situation, we served them lunch. They left without paying, acting as if it was normal. But it didn't end there. Jan became even more demanding. You're looking after Riker today too. Every day, she declared, dropping off her daughter at our shop. But we're working. It's your job as a mom to take care of her, I protested. I'm busy. Since there are hardly any customers, you might as well help me out, Jan insisted, pushing her daughter's care onto us. To her, we were just free babysitters. To fully unload her responsibilities, Jan and her mother started visiting our restaurant frequently. I'm sorry about my family. I didn't mean to cause trouble for you or the restaurant, Kelly, John S. apologized after they left Riker behind and left. Our business wasn't booming, and their disruptions were part of the problem. Our regular customers, who preferred a peaceful atmosphere, stopped coming. It wasn't just about John anymore. Poor Riker was caught in the middle. Holding my niece close, I sighed deeply. We kept going despite the weight on our hearts. But a few weeks later, things took an unexpected turn with my in-laws. One evening, after closing the restaurant, Jan and my in-laws appeared at our doorstep. Instead of at the restaurant, they were at our house. When John and I opened the door, Jan abruptly handed Riker to us, looking bewildered. I'm leaving my child with you. Appreciate it. John and I were stunned, our eyes wide. What do you mean? I asked, though I suspected it was because we couldn't have kids. You're not busy since the restaurant is quiet, right? So you can be Riker's parents, she explained, deciding to completely abandon her niece. Even the grandparents didn't want to care for her. John's face flushed with anger at their callousness. This is too much. You're giving up on Riker. That's not right. I thought you guys, without kids, could handle her, Jan said, her tone tense. Riker, sensing the tension, nervously sucked her finger and looked down. But you don't have to worry about that. Take her back, I firmly replied. Kids need their moms. Even a 2-year-old knows that. You can't refuse. If there was a serious reason, maybe, but I can't agree to selfish excuses like it's too much trouble. I rejected her request firmly. We're busy with work, and honestly, I don't find a child with my ex-husband's blood cute at all. I said, shocked at my own words. That's something a parent should never say, especially not in front of Ricker. It's unacceptable. My in-laws sided with her, sharing her views. Jane and her parents would only make this poor child suffer, they said. Realizing this, I held Riker close, feeling a strong sense of duty. I have to make this child happy. So are you really okay with Riker being our child? I asked Jane firmly. She smirked. Of course, and I'll sell you all her baby stuff and toys. I don't need them anymore, so you better buy everything, she said, her parents smirking behind her. Not only were they avoiding their responsibilities, but they also wanted to make money from us. They were beyond redemption, but if it meant cutting ties with them, it was a win for us. When I talked to John about it, he agreed. Yes, we'll buy everything you're selling, but in return, stay away from us, I told him firmly. Jane stepped closer, asserting, don't act so superior. You're just a daughter-in-law. I was going to sell them anyway. Just be prepared for a big bill. After using us to their advantage, Jan and her parents left in a hurry. True to her word, Jan sent a box of Riker's used toys and clothes, along with a hefty bill of $30,000. With the restaurant struggling and our finances stretched thin, I couldn't afford such extravagance for Riker. But I still had some savings from before I got married. No, this is too expensive. It shouldn't cost that much, I muttered nervously. Despite my concerns about depleting our savings, using items Riker was familiar with might provide her with comfort, right? As I anxiously waited for a response, as I watched my husband in silent contemplation, he finally agreed with me. You're right. Rhea would be happier with us than in her old home. Thank you, honey. Let's take care of this child together. And so, we ended up raising Rhea as our own daughter, alongside managing the restaurant. Without the in-laws around, our stress lessened, and both my husband and I cherished Rhea deeply. She was so sweet, and I felt inspired to do anything for her. But our lives weren't just about adding a new family member. What a busy day it's been. Indeed, who would have thought our restaurant would be so packed? At the end of a long day, my husband and I shared a laugh. Our once quiet restaurant was now booming thanks to a recent addition to the menu, an omelet that had unexpectedly gone viral on social media. What surprised us the most was how this idea came about. Who would have guessed it was Rhea's suggestion? As I affectionately patted her head, I recounted. While we were brainstorming new menu items, Rhea suddenly said omelette. It caught us off guard. Since we didn't offer omelettes at the time, I whipped up a special one loaded with eggs and topped it with our signature demi glace sauce. Following John's approach, we personalized each serving to suit our customers' tastes. It turned out to be a huge hit, and Rhea continued to lend a hand whenever I experimented with new dishes. She'd mumble names like Napoleon or pudding, and when John whipped up those dishes, they were a hit. Customers would exclaim, "This is exactly what I was craving," and happily dig in. With the old challenges of running the restaurant behind us, life became more exciting with Rhea around. I couldn't help but wonder if Rhea possessed some mysterious power. It seemed possible. The other day, when I couldn't find my glasses, Rhea was just staring behind a shelf. Lo and behold, there they were, tucked behind it. Wow, Rhea, that's incredible. Of course, it was all thanks to John's setup. When we praised them, Rhea and my husband would exchange happy smiles. They looked like they had always been a part of our family. Initially worried, I now felt confident about providing Rhea with a good life. Even in ordinary moments, I felt a profound sense of happiness. But then, something unbelievable caught my attention. What's this? Hey, come see this. John, glancing at his phone, exclaimed in surprise. Intrigued, I peered over to look at the screen, where a news article was displayed. The contents shocked me so much that my eyes widened. Can this really happen? Surprised, Rhea observed us, then grabbed a box of building blocks and slowly offered it to us. We shook it, hearing something inside. Is there something in here? I asked, meeting Rhea's serious gaze. If Rhea was this focused, there must be something important. We carefully examined the blocks and were stunned. An underlying anger began to simmer within me. To think she had hidden something like this. Unforgivable. Despite my anger, we knew we had to wait for the right moment. A few weeks later, in the dead of night, Jan and I were startled awake by the doorbell. Careful not to disturb Rare, we cautiously opened the front door to find Jolie standing there with disheveled hair. "Give me back my daughter, now." Her sudden demand left John and me exchanging looks. "Weren't you the one who left her with us? What's changed now? Weren't we supposed to stay out of each other's lives?" I challenged, but before we could shut the door, Jolie forcefully wedged her foot in, refusing to leave. "She's my child. I'm here to take her back," she insisted. We explained it wasn't possible, but Jolie kept pushing to take her daughter, causing a scene. Frustrated by her selfishness, I sighed deeply and crossed my arms. "Please don't take your frustrations out on us because of your work troubles," I said. Caught off guard, Jolie's face flushed red with embarrassment. "What? How did you know about that?" she stammered, clearly flustered. Recalling the recent news I had seen on John's phone, it was about a scandal at the chain restaurant where Jolie's family worked. They had been caught using expired ingredients to save money, leading to a widespread food poisoning incident. The backlash on media and social platforms had been severe, and the chain's reputation had taken a nosedive. Everything was fine until we gave up our daughter, and then this happened. "It must be because she's gone," I mused. Jolie, clearly facing severe consequences, erupted in anger. "What are you talking about? Rare has nothing to do with this." "No, she's not involved," I assured her. Since then, everything had been going downhill. According to Jolie, their troubles didn't end there. Her mother lost a wallet containing a large sum of money, and her father was involved in a car accident that cost $6,000 in damages. Jolie blamed Rare for their misfortunes. "Since you took Rare, your restaurant has been thriving. It's hard not to think she's involved." Her words left John and me speechless. While we couldn't blame Rare for all their misfortunes, we couldn't deny the strange coincidence. Maybe I should help them a bit. Despite their actions, it's hard to watch them suffer, I pondered aloud. But before I could say more, Jolie raised her voice sharply. "With that child, we would be secure, and all this misfortune would come your way instead." Her words extinguished any sympathy I had. "We will never give Rare back to you. It's only been a few months, but we've grown to love her as if she were our own. We can't hand her over to someone who only wants her back for their own gain," I declared, glaring at Jolie with a firm expression. "Don't speak to my wife like that. Your greed is apparent. I care for Rare far more than you ever did. I won't let her go, no matter what." "Please, leave," John added, his tone resolute. I couldn't forgive Jolie for treating her own daughter like a commodity, something to exploit. Our restaurant's success was due to John's meticulous attention to detail, seasoning and presenting each dish according to our customers' preferences. He had utilized hints from Rare to cater to individual tastes, offering rich flavors, light options, or a touch of spice. His creative plating, including edible flowers for Instagram-worthy dishes and generous portions for hearty appetites, had become a hit. While Rare had contributed to our success, it was John's dedication that truly made a difference. "She's not a cash cow to be returned," I retorted with disdain. Jolie's face twisted with resentment as Jayan looked at her with pity. "No matter how much you protest, my decision won't change." "I don't want to see you again," Jayan stated firmly. With calm resolve, I handed Jolie a flash drive that she hadn't noticed before. "Our misfortunes aren't because of Rare, but a consequence of actions like yours, right?" Jolie's face paled as she recognized the drive. "That's the one my parents and I have been searching for." "How did you get it?" "It came out of the toys," I replied calmly. "It might actually be worth what you paid for it," I remarked. The flash drive had been inside the box Rare handed to us, and considering her mysterious abilities, I believed there was a reason she had handled it. To our surprise, the drive contained data from a secret ledger, revealing receipts from suppliers and evidence of inflated charges. Rare's parents, former executives at the company, had been embezzling funds by overcharging for ingredients and pocketing the excess. The calculation showed embezzled funds totaling about $2 million. Rare had sensed something was wrong and hid the drive, along with some blocks. "I can't believe we missed it even after searching the house," Jolie muttered in disbelief. She snatched the flash drive from my hand, looking relieved. "I've already informed your company," she declared confidently. But as the reality of her actions sank in, she began to tremble. "No, if they find out about the embezzlement, our lives are over," she confessed, her bravado crumbling. Begging for forgiveness, she pleaded with us to help cover up her crimes. but her past actions couldn't be erased. My husband, firm in his resolve, advised against forgiveness. "There's nothing more we can do but face reality," he muttered. As Jolie dialed the phone with trembling hands, tears streaking her face, I listened to her conversation with my in-laws. It was a bitter reckoning for them all. They screamed in shock and then asked to speak with me. As soon as I took the phone, my in-laws pleaded, "Please, you have to do something. We're begging you." I listened in silence, but after a moment, I took a deep breath. "You must face the consequences of your own actions. Goodbye." With that, I ended the call and returned the smartphone to Jolie. "Think about it carefully. If you truly want to raise Rare, I'll consider it. Is that what you really want? I doubt we'll ever see eye to eye, no matter how much we talk. Please leave. Your presence is unwelcome. If you don't, I'll have to involve the authorities." Jolie flinched and backed away, so I firmly shut the door without mercy. Peeking from the second-floor window, I watched as she walked away, her figure fading into the distance. That was the end of our connection. Later on, my in-laws and Jolie were dismissed from the company for their embezzlement. They were sued and eventually arrested. After serving their sentences, they would have to repay the $2 million they stole. Even after their release, they would endure the consequences for a long time. It's true what they say, you reap what you sow. Meanwhile, we officially adopted Rare as our daughter. Jen and I continued to manage our restaurant and witnessed Rare's growth. Our business thrived, and while the extent of Rare's abilities remained unknown, one thing was certain. Jen and I loved Rare more than anyone else. After all, she was our precious daughter.
What in the world is happening? I stared at the video playing on my phone. It was showing our home, specifically our bedroom. I have an app on my phone that streams footage from our security cameras. In the footage, I saw my husband with another woman. Were they hugging? They looked too close to just be friends. Then I heard voices. "You sure she has no idea?" "Yeah, I've been following your plan perfectly. She's clueless, believes everything." I can imagine it. They laughed and playfully fell onto the bed. I was shocked because that woman was my own sister. I'm Nancy Hadley, 50 years old. My husband David, who's turning 55 this year, and I have been married for 20 years. We don't have kids, and it's just been the two of us. Life was comfortable until about 10 years ago when David was diagnosed with early onset dementia. Over time, his mistakes became more serious. He started forgetting important business meetings, even struggling to remember how to do his job. Work became a real challenge. In daily life, he couldn't recall where he put things, had trouble dressing himself, and his sense of direction got so bad that he would bump into things. There was even a scary incident when he left the kettle on the stove, almost causing a fire. So David and I turned to my sister Anne, who manages a care home. Following her suggestion, we had him tested at a hospital, and that's when he received the diagnosis of early onset dementia. David had to retire from his job, and now a caregiver from Anne's facility comes to our home twice a week. These days, I'm the main provider for the family, keeping busy with work every day. Nancy, how is David doing? It was the day our regular caregiver, Ms. Johnson, visited our home. You're here today too. He's your husband, so I'm concerned. After all, we're like family. Since we started relying on Anne's facility, she would often check in before I left for work. She's been caring for David like a brother since we got married. Back when we were younger, she always wanted a big brother, and she was the most heartbroken when David was diagnosed with dementia. Despite being busy with her own work, her frequent check-ins meant a lot to us. Thanks to Anne and Ms. Johnson, I can leave David at home with peace of mind while I work. My income is crucial for our finances, and I'm grateful to both of them. However, they can't come on weekends, so I bear the caregiving responsibility alone during that time. Balancing work on weekdays and caring for David on weekends leaves me with very little time for myself. I wasn't fully aware of it, but I must have been quite exhausted. A nurse, familiar with me from the hospital, where I took David for his regular checkup, noticed my fatigue. "Mrs. Hadley, taking care of your husband is undoubtedly tough. But you also need some time to rest on your own." You're right. While I know I can ask Anne and Ms. Johnson for help in a pinch, I don't want to trouble them further. By the way, a new nurse at the hospital, who used to work at a specialized dementia hospital in New York, suggested, maybe she can assist you. Look, there she is. When I looked where the nurse pointed, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Amy, my college best friend. Amy seemed surprised too, but we hugged and celebrated our reunion. Amy, who was active in the softball club in college, still looked sharp with her neat short haircut. Nancy, you haven't changed at all. Neither have you, Amy. I'm so glad to see you. Amy shared that she waited for her children to grow up, got divorced, and returned to her hometown. Just let me know when you're free for a cup of coffee, she suggested. When David, in his wheelchair, emerged from the examination room after his tests, I introduced him, saying, "Oh, this is my husband, David. It's been ages since our wedding." That's right. It's been a long time. Amy, Nancy's college friend, bent down to match eye level with David, who was seated in a wheelchair, and paused for a moment. Amy, is everything okay? Oh, sorry, David. We met once at your wedding. Is that right? I'm looking forward to taking care of you in the future. Thank you in advance. David smiled and replied. Amy seemed to look at David with a somewhat meaningful expression, perhaps noticing my puzzled look. She stood up with a smile. I've taken care of many patients like your husband, so I might be able to offer some advice. I think I can be of help, so feel free to ask. Absolutely, I'll definitely rely on you. Thanks, Amy. We said our goodbyes. Later on, I encountered Amy on several occasions, such as when I went to get David's medicine or when his health declined. Each time, Amy would look at me with concern, but I pretended not to notice and brushed it off. A few months after my reunion with Amy, David, and I visited the hospital together. Just as David was called in for an examination, I heard Nancy. When I turned toward the voice, Amy looked serious. Amy, is everything okay? Your husband, David, just went in for his examination. Do you have a moment to spare? Certainly I do. Amy guided me to a counseling room. Nancy, how's it going with taking care of David? Are you worried about yourself? Thanks. I shared updates on David's recent health and mentioned how the constant caregiving without breaks was affecting my well-being. Amy attentively listened to my story. Initially, I thought she was just concerned about my health. But then she began with, "Actually, Nancy." What she said next was quite unbelievable. About a week before we reconnected, Amy started, she was out shopping in town when she saw Anne with a man she recognized. Amy knew Anne as my sister, but the man's face seemed familiar to her. When Amy approached them and Anne introduced the man as her boyfriend, it was only when we met again at the hospital that I realized it was David, your husband. It was all so perplexing. That's surprising. No wonder you had a strange look on your face back then. Amy had seen Anne and David together in town a week before our reunion. However, David seemed entirely unaware of Amy's presence. I looked different back then. I had longer hair down to my shoulders and wore glasses. I looked completely different. This might explain why he didn't recognize her, but it was still quite a revelation. There's one more thing that's been bothering me. According to Amy, David's responses at the hospital seemed strangely unnatural for someone with dementia. She mentioned that his behavior resembled someone she encountered at the hospital where she used to work, someone pretending to have dementia. The man I saw in town was walking confidently, responding clearly. He looked perfectly healthy. Could it have been a mistake? Maybe you misidentified him? I don't think so. You know David has those distinctive moles under his right eye, right? The man with Anne had them too. It's kind of a distinctive feature for a guy. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be talking about your husband that way. Amy apologized, seemingly realizing that her comment was a bit inappropriate. But it's true. David does have those moles. It's not common to find someone else with the same face and mole positioning. Could it be that David has been pretending to have dementia for 10 years and is having an affair with Anne? The story seemed unbelievable, but Amy was known for her honesty. Honestly, I don't think highly of this hospital, Amy confessed. What? The doctors here aren't great, and I've heard some bad rumors. Doesn't it strike you as odd that they have so many patients? I believe you should get a proper check to confirm if David really has dementia. Amy suggested with a serious expression. Stunned by Amy's words, I went to a big box store and purchased a home security camera. I discreetly placed it in the living room and bedroom to covertly capture what was happening while I was at work. I set it up to monitor on my smartphone and checked in during breaks. Indeed, David's actions were inconsistent with what he portrayed to me. He wasn't disoriented or confused about the placement of things. He was leading a seemingly normal life. Furthermore, when Miss Johnson, whom I had entrusted to look after David, arrived, there was no indication of her providing care. Additionally, I discovered that Anne had been frequenting my home during my absences. Their conversations were unequivocally captured on the recorded footage. You're not risking exposure by pretending to have dementia, David. No, not at all. I'm following Anne's suggestions perfectly. Pretending to be unaware of the date or the locations of things is working like a charm. Acting like I don't write or go outside. Confusing day with night. It's all part of the plan. Nancy is trusting, so I doubt she'll suspect anything. What about Miss Johnson? Is she reliable, or will she spill the secret? Oh, she's reliable. Being a single mom, she needs the money. I've increased her salary a bit, and she's been keeping things hush-hush. After sharing a laugh, they would flirt and head to the bedroom. The footage left me utterly speechless. It was hard to fathom that my own sister and husband were colluding behind my back, yet the undeniable truth was right there on the recording. Faced with this shocking revelation, I felt lost. A few days later, I found the courage to confront Miss Johnson, who had been caring for David. When I reached out to her, she agreed to meet the following Saturday. I visited her apartment and presented the footage. She appeared resigned, tears filling her eyes as she apologized. This is the truth. I've been deceiving you all this time, and I'm truly sorry. I don't have a license, and finding another job was a struggle. I had no choice but to go along with what Anne said because she offered me such attractive terms. As seen in the footage, Anne, a single mother supporting her child alone, needed the money. However, she grappled with guilt as she realized she was aiding in deception. Her guilt led her to share her testimony with me and provide copies of receipts, daily reports, and her diary from that period. Regardless of my financial struggles, what I did was unacceptable as a human being. I am truly, deeply sorry. She continued to express remorse repeatedly. In addition to the evidence and testimony from Miss Johnson, I decided to gather more proof. After meeting with various involved parties and learning their perspectives, I consulted with my lawyer and opted to confront David and Anne at the site of their affair. On a typical weekday, feigning my usual work routine, I lingered near my house. When Anne arrived and it appeared to be the opportune moment for the two of them, I returned home, capturing the scene. Caught off guard and unable to escape, they panicked. With a cold tone, I said, "I know everything now, David. I heard you messed up your cherished job, got sidelined, and grew to dislike your work." These were details his co-worker had shared about David's conversations with colleagues. There's nothing left for me here. Nancy is earning well. I want to quit and live a relaxed life. Observing my composed demeanor, David hastily began to confess. It wasn't my idea. Anne seduced me. She suggested we pretend to have dementia, be supported by you while you're at work, and meet as much as we want. Even Miss Johnson had been recruited by Anne to serve as an alibi. David's words seemed to place the blame on Anne rather than me. Upon hearing David's accusations, Anne became hysterical and erupted in anger. What the heck? David was fully on board with the plan, and now he's trying to evade responsibility. That's cowardly. Shut up. You're the one who kept pushing me into this. I just went along with what you said. As they bickered stark naked, my heart grew colder. I couldn't tolerate the situation any longer. That's enough, both of you. Get out. I threw their clothes, along with Anne's purse scattered on the floor, out of the living room window and then closed it. Despite their persistent banging on the window and pleas for an explanation, I ignored them, closing the curtains. When their attempts to communicate persisted, I sent a message on WhatsApp stating, "Be quiet. If you don't want the cops called, leave now." Suddenly, they fell silent. For the next few days, they continued to visit the house and send messages on WhatsApp, which became increasingly irritating. So, I sold the house and relocated to a weekly rental apartment. When David was diagnosed with dementia, I proactively changed the title of our jointly owned house to my name. Considering David's retirement and diminished ability to handle financial matters, I thought it prudent to avoid potential complications if a dementia patient had decision-making authority during an emergency. Unexpectedly, I was able to sell the house for more than anticipated and use the proceeds to quietly purchase an apartment. While I hadn't anticipated this specific situation, I must commend past Nancy for her foresight. Subsequently, I initiated a divorce from David and asserted a claim for the division of assets. Whether or not David has the means to comply is inconsequential. It is a declaration that they inflicted this upon me. I will neither forgive nor forget. After the divorce, I heard through the grapevine that David remarried and now resides in Anne's house. However, it appears that their new life together is not thriving. While this is purely speculative, I believe David and Anne might have been swept up in the excitement of their affair. Marriage brings a different set of challenges, forcing them to confront each other's realities, acknowledge differences, and at times turn a blind eye. Coping with these complexities must be challenging for a couple who tied the knot in the aftermath of an affair, especially considering both sets of parents have already passed away. The house that David and I once called home has already been sold. David is left without a place to return to, and with no other family to lean on. They must confront their challenges on their own. Frankly, I couldn't be less concerned. I would say they are facing the consequences they rightfully earned. Thanks to Miss Johnson's revelation, Anne's facility lost its license and was forced to shut down. It appears the facility wasn't generating enough profit to repay the bank loan taken when it opened, leaving Anne with a substantial amount of debt. It seems like an appropriate price for a sister who stole her sibling's husband. The dubious doctor who issued the fraudulent diagnosis also faced repercussions. Following the incident, his staff, including Amy, resigned one by one, rendering it impossible to sustain the business and resulting in the closure of his clinic. Evidently, he had been accepting requests from questionable sources, providing false medical reports as he did for David, and, in return, receiving patient referrals. This unveiled the truth behind why he had a considerable number of patients despite lacking the necessary skill and a reputable status. Discovering the truth was a shock, and I couldn't help but be appalled by the audacity of some doctors. However, I acknowledge my own responsibility in this matter. I was overly trusting, believing my sister's words and the dubious doctor's assertions without questioning them. According to Amy, I tend to be too kind and overly trusting. I've always been averse to doubting people, but lately, I've been reflecting on the need to scrutinize information more and think independently. On a brighter note, Amy seems to have secured a new position at a large general hospital in the neighboring town. Her work experience at a New York hospital garnered respect, and she has already earned the trust of her colleagues, enjoying her work. Following Amy's suggestion, Miss Johnson also found employment at the hospital cafeteria. Wow, adorable. Amy's eyes lit up at the sight of a puppy frolicking with a ball. This little guy is a male miniature dachshund I brought home about a month ago. He's become my cherished companion, offering solace to my heart and body after long days at work. Since the arrival of this pup, Amy has started visiting my apartment more frequently. He's just so cute. I can't resist coming to see him, she claims. However, in reality, her visits are driven by concern for me, though she won't admit it. While I've lost my husband, I now get to relish enjoyable moments with my best friend. I find myself thinking that a single life, enjoying the company of a female companion, doesn't sound too bad after all.
You're pitiful, just a dropout kid from the lowest rung. I bet you were raised in poverty and your kid is living at the bottom of society. I understand your perspective. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mary. My life has been a roller coaster, to say the least. When I was about to finish middle school, tragedy struck. I lost both my parents in a short span of time. Coping with such loss, my focus shattered, and I couldn't muster the will to study for exams anymore. Predictably, I failed all my high school entrance exams, even the backups. At 15, I found myself at a crossroads, gap year or workforce. To be honest, I did have aspirations of attending high school, but the family members who took me in were financially strained. Moreover, I felt compelled to preserve my parents' life insurance payout for future needs. Add to that the discomfort of entering high school a year late, and the decision to start working seemed the most practical. I must have been 19 then, in a relationship with John, a colleague at my workplace who was 27 at the time. You're involved with someone much older? Are you sure about this? A man pursuing a 19-year-old, can he truly be responsible? My aunt, a relative, expressed her concern, but youthful and headstrong, I disregarded her advice. John is wonderful. Sure, there's an age gap, but 8 years isn't uncommon, right? Well, if it were 25 and 33, perhaps, but 19 and 27 is quite a difference. What's the difference? Quit talking down about him. With that sentiment in mind, we tied the knot when I turned 20. A few months later, I discovered I was pregnant. Initially, I was overjoyed, but it was short-lived. When I broke the news to John, his response shattered me. What? You're planning to keep it? Seriously? No chance. I can't handle having a child with a dropout. Why should I be burdened with raising a kid who'll end up like you? Why would you say such hurtful things? You knew about my dropout status before we got married, didn't you? Yeah, I suppose, but no, it won't work out. I mean, having a child with a dropout, the child will turn out odd, right? I don't want to raise a kid like that. I also want more freedom. John's words stung, and soon he began avoiding me both at home and at work, pressing for a divorce. Over time, my feelings for him waned, and I eventually consented to the split. However, my job at the time, within a small company, lacked any provision for maternity or paternity leave, leaving me no option but to resign concurrently with the divorce. With the support of my relatives and what remained of my parents' life insurance, I safely delivered my son Jacob, pouring all my love into raising him. Despite the financial strain, I remained healthy after childbirth, juggling multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. By the time Jacob entered elementary school, I secured a full-time position, granting both financial stability and emotional bandwidth. Now, 2 decades have elapsed since those trying times. These days, Jacob and I even indulge in leisurely outings together. Hey, are you perhaps married? Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced through the air, a voice I had hoped to erase from memory. It belonged to John, my ex-husband, the man who deserted me during my pregnancy 2 decades ago. I thought it might be you, Mary. So, what brings you to a department store on your day off? Seems a bit upscale for you, John remarked, a smirk playing on his lips. Jacob, likely bewildered by the unexpected encounter, stood quietly, his expression troubled. I figured he might be your new beau, but he looks rather young, doesn't he? Ah, is this the kid from all those years ago? Ah, it's a boy. Well, it's none of my concern anyway, John continued. Indeed, you and I have long parted ways, John. Why are you even speaking to me? Don't be so bitter, Mary. Remember, we used to be deeply in love. Seems like you've turned into quite the cold-hearted woman, haven't you? John's grin held a hint of mockery, as if the past held no significance to him. Then, he uttered something utterly audacious. By the way, is he also a dropout? What? What are you implying? I retorted, taken aback by his insensitivity. Well, I mean, like mother, like son, right? If you dropped out, it's only logical that he would too, isn't it? John's words dripped with disdain. Enough. Stop with your hurtful comments, I snapped, unable to tolerate his callousness any longer. Ah, but he's got my genes, so he must have at least graduated high school, right? Although, in today's world, even with a diploma, you're still scraping the bottom of the barrel, John boasted, dropping the name of a renowned multinational corporation, the kind often plastered across TV screens. Surely, you've heard of this company, Mary. I'm a department head in a major corporation now. I guess you could say I'm part of the elite. he declared. And what would the elite want with someone like me? Are you daft? Do you honestly think I have any interest in someone as ignorant and destitute as you? I only spoke to you out of nostalgia. Frankly, you're nothing but a bother, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Don't say that, John protested weakly. That's why you'll never achieve anything significant. Ever since you entered my life, my fortunes have changed for the better. I was recruited by a prestigious corporation, and my career has been skyrocketing ever since. Life is certainly smoother without someone like you bringing bad luck. So, I'm a bad omen to you, John. If that's the case, perhaps it's best if you refrain from contacting me altogether. No, sometimes I'd just like to glance at the bottom of the barrel to remind myself of how fortunate I am. You see, in my workplace, there's no one quite like you, not even among the lowest-ranked employees. But it's true what they say about poverty. It's like a vortex, pulling you down no matter what. Is that all you wanted to say? We're pressed for time, I interjected, urging John to get to the point. Just a moment, let me have a word with my son, John replied casually, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder with a self-satisfied grin. Then, with a smile still lingering on his face, he addressed Jacob. Life may be tough for you too, but it is what it is. Blame your mother for her poverty and lack of education. If you're looking for someone to resent, point it towards her for having you straight out of middle school. John's expression radiated satisfaction as he glanced around. John, what's taking so long? The restroom was crowded, I inquired, wondering why he was lingering. Oh, I just bumped into someone from the past, John replied casually, as if nothing significant had occurred. At that moment, his wife or girlfriend joined him, a striking woman who seemed intimately connected to John. Can you believe it? This woman dropped out of high school midway through. Not even a high school graduate, but a middle school dropout. Can you imagine? John boasted, his tone dripping with condescension. And her son is likely to follow suit, destined for the bottom rung of society. Aren't you glad you didn't have to endure such a dismal existence? You're fortunate to have landed a high achiever like me, he continued, oblivious to our presence as if we were invisible. However, the woman seemed to take notice of Jacob when he lifted his head. Peering up from her books, her expression turned startled. She pointed at him, her hand trembling uncontrollably. Isn't he? What's the matter? I asked, perplexed by her sudden reaction. Isn't that the president of one of our major clients? She exclaimed. Startled by her outburst, John pivoted around. The moment his gaze landed on Jacob's face, his eyes widened in recognition. Seeing this reaction, Jacob slowly spoke up. I heard your company's name earlier, but upon seeing your face, I suspected it might be you. Indeed, you are the one. Thank you for your hospitality at that dinner the other day. Oh, Mr. Jacob, you seemed quite reserved during our dinner. It's quite surprising to witness you publicly criticizing others, labeling them as low-life and uneducated at your whim. Quite impolite of you, isn't it? The woman Lily remarked with a touch of reproach. No, that's... Lily, why didn't you inform me? John interjected, his tone tinged with frustration. I couldn't get a good look at him. Plus, I work in a different department. I can't possibly remember all the clients' faces. Lily defended herself, her voice tinged with apprehension. Useless. What did you just say? John snapped, the tension between him and Lily escalating rapidly. However, Jacob remained unfazed by their argument and spoke up calmly. Well, I'm not particularly interested in your quarrel. I now have a clearer understanding of the director's usual approach. We were in talks about implementing our system in your company, but let's abandon that idea. No, please wait. This is all just a misunderstanding, Jacob interjected, his voice tinged with urgency. Misunderstanding? How is it a misunderstanding when you publicly insulted me? John retorted, his tone laced with indignation. Well, you see, Jacob faltered, struggling to find the right words to explain himself. Mary, this is your fault, John interjected suddenly, redirecting the blame. What? How is this my fault? Mary questioned, bewildered by John's accusation. Because, why on earth would someone like you, a high school dropout, be with Mr. Jacob? Do you even realize who he is? He founded a business while still in college and holds numerous patents. The system he developed is so advanced that major companies are vying to adopt it, John explained, his voice dripping with condescension. Is that so? And why are you with him when you didn't even know that? Mary countered, her tone tinged with skepticism. I'm not quite sure. I don't typically discuss work matters with my son, John replied. He said that. Your son? Mary echoed, her tone reflecting surprise. Yes, that's correct. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I am Jacob, the prodigy, son of the high school dropout. Jacob interjected confidently. Well, that's, John stammered, caught off guard by Jacob's assertion. It seems you have something on your mind regarding my mother. Please feel free to express yourself. We likely won't have another chance to converse, Jacob encouraged, his tone composed. Oh, well, what's the situation here? How come someone like you? Why is someone like Jacob's mother a high school dropout? John stumbled over his words, struggling to articulate his thoughts. John faltered, taken aback by Jacob's unexpected interjection. He appeared torn, as if he wanted to retort but found himself at a loss for words. His gaze shifted uneasily between Mary and Jacob. From my earliest memories, my mother instilled in me a wealth of knowledge. Despite her lack of formal education beyond middle school, she delved into countless books and shared their wisdom with me, Jacob continued, his voice steady and composed. What? I never knew Mary possessed such depth, John muttered, visibly surprised. But there was one subject my mother remained silent on, the criticisms of my father, who abandoned us during her pregnancy. I've harbored resentment towards my father for as long as I can remember, but my mother always insisted it was her own naivety that led to our struggles. Even in our most dire circumstances, when we had nothing and were barely scraping by, she maintained a radiant smile. She's the person I admire most, Jacob recounted, his voice tinged with reverence. So you hold her in high regard, but Mr. Jacob, you share my bloodline, don't you? Can't you consider signing a contract with my company? John pressed, his tone pleading. Yes, I could. However, what's truly unacceptable here is your behavior. We're in a public setting, you know. Have you not considered the embarrassment you're causing? Jacob countered, his tone firm. Well, that's just my honest opinion. I simply perceive Mary as lacking in intelligence, that's all, John retorted, his tone unapologetic. And what does that make you, the man who fathered a child with this woman you call stupid? What kind of person does that make you, abandoning her when she was so young? Maybe she was innocent, but do you have any idea of the hardships she endured? You seem proud of your position in a big company, but why didn't you contribute even a single cent in child support? Jacob's accusations hung heavy in the air, leaving John speechless. As Jacob's words sank in, Lily's expression transformed. From a troubled look, her face now bore a glare directed squarely at John. Wait a minute, that's not what you told me. No, you just be quiet. That can't be true. Didn't you share with me that your previous wife cheated on you and left, that she denied you access to your child, and even refused your attempts to provide child support, forcing you to save instead? Was that entire story just a fabrication? Lily's voice was edged with disbelief and accusation. It seems highly likely that it was a fabrication. My mother and I still reside with our relatives. He knows where we are if he truly intended to provide child support. Mom, has this man ever attempted to contact you? Jacob inquired. Not once. Not on my cell phone. Not at any relative's house. And certainly, there's been no mention of child support, Mary confirmed, her tone tinged with disappointment. My revelation seemed to ignite fury in Lily, while John's complexion drained of color. You lied. You're despicable. I'm relieved I didn't marry you. It's over between us, Lily declared, her voice trembling with anger. What? Wait, Lily, please don't go, John pleaded, desperation evident in his tone. John hastily pursued Lily, leaving Jacob and me to exchange a knowing glance before erupting into laughter. John's pitiful demeanor was simply too amusing to ignore. Afterward, we indulged in some window shopping, feeling thoroughly content as we headed home. Later, Jacob filled me in on the situation. His company and John's were on the verge of sealing a significant contract, but Jacob opted to pull out at the 11th hour. Apparently, he was entirely transparent about his reasons. Your representative was my father, the man who abandoned my pregnant mother and neglected to provide child support. It's inconceivable to trust such an individual and engage in business with him. The system I've developed is akin to my own offspring. Entrusting it to him, just the thought makes my skin crawl. Predictably, this turn of events stirred up considerable turmoil. Allegedly, the company penalized John by demoting him and sidelining his role. It appears they're hoping to coax Jacob into reconsidering the contracts by making an example of John. From Jacob's perspective, it seems he might entertain the idea if they slash John's bonus. Undoubtedly, John is about to face some challenging times, but perhaps it's what he deserves, isn't it? At 48, he only has to weather another 12 years until retirement. My mom endured much harsher circumstances for far longer. When you put it into perspective, this isn't all that tough. Jacob's expression was one of genuine anger as he voiced these sentiments. I empathize with his emotions, so I have no intention of intervening. In his desperation, John has sought refuge at our relative's home. With a deep bow at the entrance, he pleads desperately. I'm deeply sorry for what I did in the past. I lied about providing child support, but I do have savings now. I'm willing to offer Jacob the equivalent of child support as a gift while I'm alive. I'll even compensate Mary if necessary. Please reconsider, John implored. However, Jacob refused to entertain such propositions. Turning to John, he stated firmly, I have no interest in your savings now. Our hardships belong to the past. You didn't support us then, and now you only seek to save yourself. That's unacceptable. I apologize. I was young and foolish. Please forgive me, John pleaded, his voice tinged with remorse. Those who genuinely regret their actions wouldn't dangle compensation as a bargaining chip. Your selfishness knows no bounds. Please leave. If you return to this house, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities. Wouldn't that further jeopardize your position at the company? Jacob's words struck a chord, prompting John to flee in a panicked frenzy. Thanks to Jacob's intervention, it's unlikely John will darken our doorstep again. We can look forward to peaceful days ahead. Currently, Jacob is focused on completing all his college credits. But once that's accomplished, he plans to treat the entire family to a trip to a hot springs resort. Despite my protests, Jacob insists on repaying our support. If that's his wish, we'll gratefully accept his generosity. Surely, we'll enjoy a